I like to watch windmills, and over the years I've made a lot of them. And lately I've made these big ones. And one of the biggest issues with making a windmill is how to make the windmill hub. It's really an important aspect of the whole thing because you want your blades to stay on this windmill. Sometimes we get 40, 50 mile an hour winds here or even higher, and that thing really spins, so you've got to have a way of keeping those blades secure on that hub. So the first thing I do is trace out a nice big circle on some scrap lumber. I always save all my old plywood, and I just make a random size circle here for the hub and mark the center so I don't lose track of where that center is in that hub. And I've got 2 pieces of plywood here, and so right now I'm just attaching the 2 temporarily. Later on I'll use a nice waterproof glue and we'll glue these 2 circles together. But for now we're just attach them with 4 screws. Now we'll take it over to the bandsaw where we can saw out that circle. And like I said, I'm sawing through 2 layers there of 3/4 inch plywood. Nice solid hub. It's always good if you have a certain amount of precision here when you cut these things out. The windmill will spin better if it's balanced, but it's not real critical if you're just making windmill for decorative purposes. Now I'm just sanding off any little edges there so that I have a nice round hub. There's my buddies. They mess around in the shop here while I'm trying to work. Alright, so the next thing we'll do is we've got our center mark, so we'll just draw a straight line all the way across that hub. And I decided that this hub would have 12 blades. I've made them with 4 and 8 and even 16. But I decided to make it with 12 this time. And so a circle is 360 degrees. So if you divide 360 by 12, you get 30. So I'm going to mark using the protractor 30, there's 60, 90, 120, 150, and then 180s. So we've got half of the hub marked out there. Now we'll just draw our lines and then extend them right straight across to finish off the hub. And so we've got 12 spokes there. Now I like to draw a straight line across the edge there from line to line, and that gives you a flat surface there. When you go to put your blades in, you can cut, you'll see in a minute here, you can cut those angles in that hub on a nice flat surface. So I go around and cut those off, and you can see how they're flat. There'll be 12 of those little flat spots around there. Now we'll set our fence there at 60 degrees. I found that 60 degrees is about a nice angle for these blades in the hub. And then I've got my dado blades in, and I've got it so that I can use that 1/4 inch luan to make my blades out of. And I set it about 1 inch high. And I'll give a nice deep cut in that hub for those blades to glue in there. So I take a piece of scrap wood and just saw through to make sure everything's going to work. And you can see there, I'll lay the protractor on, and you can see that angle. It comes right out to 60 degrees. So we're ready to go. So now we put our hub in and clamp it securely, and we'll line that line up on the dado blade so that it's just right on the edge of that. So I've got it lined up and clamped. Now we'll shove it through the dado. Makes about a 1/4 inch slot through there. Alright, so now it's just a matter of taking that hub on and off and setting it for each one of those lines and cutting those nice dados through there. So it takes a little time to set it up each time, but that's what we need to do to get these things cut precisely right on the edge of those lines. I always take that blade and set it right down at the very bottom of the blade when I set it on the line, and I do it the same way every time, so that when I get done, everything will be the same, each one of those cuts. So there we go. We've got our hub all ready to go. So now I take those 4 screws out, take it apart, and glue it up. Okay, a little bit on this gluing business. With Gorilla Glue, it says to dampen both surfaces before you apply the glue. And so I use a putty knife to apply this glue onto one surface. Just a thin coat is all you need, because this stuff is going to expand as it dries. And it's a real strong bond and it's waterproof. I put several clamps on there. Okay, well, I got the hub glued up. And you can never have too many clamps. Really clamp it down. And as that glue dries, it swells. You just put a little thin layer on one of the pieces. When you clamp it together, it's there forever. And a little bit of that glue will squeeze out. And I'll usually have to take my jackknife and kind of scrape it off. There's some right there. That's looking good. So now we'll see if the blades fit. I've got to cut a bunch of these. I think I have half of them. I think I have 6 blades. Like I said, some of these blades were off from another windmill that I tried to attach with dowels, and that didn't work so good. The dowels weren't enough surface area to hold those blades. So this way, when I glue these in, they'll swell right up in there and never come out. Alright, it's a brand new day. It's raining out today. I made this windmill a different way. I used dowels, and I glued them in that hub, but there wasn't enough surface area to hold, and after a while the wind tore them out of there. So that wasn't such a good design. So we'll finish cutting out our blades. I've got 6 more of those to cut out. And I just freehand them on the table saw here. And then take them over onto the jigsaw and finish cutting those round ends. And after we get finished cutting all these blades out, we'll get to work on putting this bolt in the center of the hub. I've used all kinds of ways of putting this thing onto the windmill, and I've even used bearings in the middle there and put a shaft in, but that gets pretty expensive. And so I decided that on these decorative windmills, you can just use a bolt and use some kind of a sleeve, and in this case I found a piece of pipe, and I'll shove that bolt down through there, and it'll spin a good long time using that pipe. So we'll cut off a little piece here that'll fit through that hub. And of course, when we get started here, we run on a battery power. Change batteries and finish it off. Here's my little homemade grinder. My dad actually made this thing about 50 years ago. I still use it. Works good in the shop here. So I'll put a little bevel on the end of that pipe, so when I drive it through the center of the hub, it'll slide right through that hub. Okay, so next, we'll give it a little test there. Oh, that'll spin just dandy. Next, we're going to find a drill bit that is just the outside diameter of that pipe. And I'll drill a hole through the hub, and I always make sure that this is a good tight fit. Then I use some Gorilla Glue, and on that glue it says to dampen both objects that you're trying to glue together. And so I use a little paintbrush to do that. Puts them on the pipe too. And when you go to use this Gorilla Glue, you want to wear gloves. I found that out the hard way. That stuff will stain your fingers and takes forever to get the glue off. Then I read on the bottle, it tells you to wear gloves. Well, live and learn. Okay, so we'll take a paintbrush, and all you need is a little thin coat of glue, because this type of glue expands, and it will it'll glue those two parts together. That'll be a forever joint. It's waterproof too. Alright, so we've got glue on both surfaces just to make sure. Now we'll tap it down through the hub. Leave it sticking up just a little bit. I'm going to put a washer on there anyhow. So there we go. That's what I'm using to spin that windmill on. Alright, it's coffee break time, and I've got to take time out and talk to my buddies here. Okay, so I'm finally getting back to it. It's time to glue those blades into the hub. And so the first step is to dampen both the hub and the blade. A little bit of water there. And then apply the Gorilla Glue. And just a thin coating, as I mentioned before, is all you need. And press it into the hub and make sure I get it right where I want it. That glue is very tacky, but you can still move the piece around if you need to. Then I take some little wire nails and tap in there just to hold that blade in place until the glue starts to set up. Once it starts to set, you can't begin to move those blades. So we're just getting them all in place there. So very soon here, the toughest part of the job will be done. The hub is finished and the blades are glued in. Then we can get on to building the rest of the windmill. But this is the tricky part. This is the part that takes the most time. Now here we go with the glue. It's been about 10 minutes maybe, and you can see how that glue is expanding. And I let it set up a little more, then I take my jackknife and just scrape that excess out of there. In my next video, I'll show you how to make the roundhouse and sail so this thing will turn in the wind. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit the like button and consider subscribing to Tim Tools 99. Thanks for watching.